I'd like to talk about a new product that we just won Best New Product of the Year award at the recent American Academy of Audiology show. Uh, Dry Caddy is a device that's a static dryer for hearing aids, and I'd like to show you how it works. It comes packaged in a nice container like this. You can simply pull off the top, and when you do, you'll find a jar, instructions, and you'll also find inside the jar 4 more of what we call dry disc. The dry disc have a proprietary molecular sieve desiccant inside, which is very aggressive for grabbing and holding water molecules that we find very often in hearing aids. So it's an ideal material for drying the hearing aids, binding up those water molecules and holding them. The way you use the Dry Caddy is simply to pull off the seal, and that'll activate the dry disc. Then you need to put the date that you put the dry disc into service. And then place the dry disc with the hole side up in the bottom of the jar, and then you can just close the jar. You want to always keep the jar closed when you're not using it. Now, at night, what you do, you simply take your hearing aid off, open up the battery door, open up the Dry Caddy, and put your hearing instrument inside, 1 or 2, close the lid on the Dry Caddy. What it's doing right now, the molecular sieve is actually pulling the moisture out of the little spaces on the hearing aids and drying it very effectively. In the morning when you get up, you simply take the top off, pull your hearing instruments out, but be sure and put the top back on the Dry Caddy, otherwise it will be trying to suck the moisture out of the room. Now, Dry Caddy is so effective because we have disposable dry disc. There are other products on the market where they say the desiccant can be regenerated, but there's some real problems with doing that, and I'd like to explain a few of those problems. With silica gel, which is another type of desiccating material that holds a lot of water, but the problem is with silica gel, in order to dry it out, it takes a very low temperature for a long period of time. Most of these containers will say, take the desiccating material, put it in the oven at a low temperature, leave it in the oven for a number of hours, and then when you take it out, you have to actually put a jar on top of the silicon gel. That's a real problem, and some of these products also have an indicating color that turns from blue to pink. Blue is when it's supposed to be very good. Pink is when it's absorbed a lot of moisture. The problem with that is the indicating material that turns from blue to pink is a cobalt chloride. And cobalt chloride is a carcinogenic material, and I don't think most people want to be putting these things in the oven. As a matter of fact, that material is banned for use in products overseas. The other material that is used for drying hearing aids is what's called a molecular sieve. Now, we have a proprietary molecular sieve inside of our dry disc. By proprietary, it's actually designed for the temperature range we operate at and for how long it's going to be used. Some molecular sieves on the market, they say you can regenerate also. The problem with regenerating a molecular sieve is it has to be regenerated at a very high temperature. And some of the instructions on some of the materials that are on the market say place it in the microwave. The molecular sieve is like little beads, and generally these little beads are covered with a fabric to keep them from going all over the room. Well, in order to dry that, you have to put that in your microwave at a high temperature. What happens, it off-gasses the water molecules that it's grabbed so fast that the cloth covering on top actually becomes saturated with moisture. And then when you take it out of the microwave, the top covering will be very hot, and it'll also be wet and damp. Well, what happens, all of the moisture that you've off-gassed from the desiccating material actually is absorbed back into the material you were trying to dry. The only way you can actually tell when something is totally dry from trying to regenerate something like that would be using a gram scale. And it would have to be a gram scale that's down in the hundredths of a gram in order to tell when the material is totally dry. Our product, the disc, as I mentioned, are good for 2 months. In 2 months, you simply discard the disc and place another one in. DryCaddy is ideal for people that don't have any type of drying product for their hearing aids, or if they're using one of the older products. This is actually the most superior product on the market. However, the best drying product is actually Dry and Store. Dry and Store combines all of the elements that you really need to dry a hearing aid with. It includes, and I should mention, the Dry and Store products are not passive dryers, they're active dryers. And they include heat, they include moving air, and also, again, a charged desiccating material. In Dry and Store, again, we use a proprietary molecular sieve. This way, what happens with the Dry and Store, the heat breaks the surface tension of the water molecules, the air or the fan that's in there moves them, and then the desiccating material grabs those water molecules. Water molecules like to go from an area of high concentration to low concentration. What I'd like to show you now is how effective our desiccating material is as far as absorbing moisture. What I have here is one of our dry discs, and if we can just kind of zoom in on this. At this time, I'd like to show you what's inside of our dry disc. Here you can see our proprietary molecular sieve, and it appears to be like little balls, and that's why you got to keep them closed up, because otherwise if they get on the floor you would have a mess. But what I want to show you, I've cut the bottom off of this thing. I want to show you how aggressive this is as far as it absorbing moisture. So I've got a little spray bottle here. I'm going to spray it, and if you watch, you'll see it, the moisture on the beads, and then it'll just disappear. So you can see how fast the moisture went away. I'll do it one more time. And now if I put a lot of moisture on it, it's kind of amazing. You'd never do this, but if we put a lot of moisture, you'll actually see this thing make a sound and smoke. And that's an exothermic reaction that's occurring because of the aggressiveness of the desiccant. I hope this short video has given you some insight into why DryCaddy was voted the best new product of the year at the recent American Academy of Audiology convention. DryCaddy can be purchased from most hearing aid dispensers or audiologists throughout the country for $19.95.